Hey everyone, welcome to my challenger guide to the Reworked Taliyah. She hasn't been in this state for that long, so I don't want to do a full in-depth guide yet, but I want you guys to know how to play her and kind of get my current thoughts on the champion in this video. So first off, I think the Reworked Taliyah made her a lot weaker early game, but much stronger in the mid and late game. She's much more of like a CCing and kind of like secondary damage champion as opposed to just like a pure glass cannon than she was before. I think also she's quite a lot easier to play, and I think she will probably be stronger overall once people kind of get used to the new build. So speaking of the build, we have a couple really good rune pages. First off, we've got the First Strike, Inspiration Primary, Sorcery Secondary build. This is really good scaling, and I think it fits really well with what Taliyah wants to do. Obviously, the runes within these are kind of interchangeable. You know, you can take stuff like Time Warp Tonic and Biscuits if you're against skill shots. If you want more greedy, you know, you can go for stuff like Minion Demat and Boots. It kind of depends on what you need, but I think this is like overall the best scaling and probably the page that I like the most. Another one that I think that's quite good is Comet with Sorcery Primary and Inspiration Secondary. This gives you a lot more lane power, and you can kind of like mix around with what you want to do. You can take, for example, Scorch if you really want to lean into that kind of laning identity. You can take Gathering Storm for more scaling, or you could opt for more roaming with Celerity and Water Walking. So there's a lot of options here. Overall, I still prefer the First Strike build, but Comet is quite good too. I don't really think Electrocute is that good anymore. I think Taliyah's identity has shifted too much from being a burst mage into more of a DPS and like cooldowns focused mage, so I don't recommend going that anymore, and I highly recommend switching to one of the new pages. For the item build, I highly recommend starting Tear in easy matchups and Corrupting Potion in more difficult matchups. I think for your first mythic, you either go Everfrost or Liandry's. Everfrost, it gives you a bit more tankiness, allows for a bit more setup, whereas Liandry's, it gives you a bit more DPS, a lot more poke damage kind of over the fight, and also gives you a bit more CDR, so you can kind of mix and match there depending on what you need. For boots, I recommend Sorcery Shoes if you're the solo AP on your team. Otherwise, I think Lucidity boots really synergize well with what Taliyah wants. For your second item, I recommend picking up Seraph's Embrace. I think the extra mana, the extra CDR is really good on her, and it really fits with what Taliyah wants. You can still go for a more like one-shot focused build or flat pen build with Shadow Flame instead, but I don't think it's as good. And then from that point on, you kind of just build items as you need. So like Rabadons and Void stuff if you really need damage, or more defensive items like Zhonya's or Banshees, or whatever you need basically depending on the game. For your skill order, it's best to first max Q, then E, then W, and of course put a point in R whenever you're able to. For summoners, I obviously recommend taking Flash. You're a very immobile champion and you don't have much ways to kind of get out of danger without it, but I do think your secondary sum is pretty flexible. I actually think defensive sums are a lot better than they used to be, so I think things like TP or Exhaust. TP can help you a lot with like your weak early game. Stuff like Exhaust, Heal, Cleanse, that sort of stuff can help a lot with like those early skirmishes, kind of giving you a little bit more power. I don't recommend Ignite as much as I did before, because again, before Taliyah used to have this really high burst and could often go for solo kills with Ignite, but I think now it's like kind of difficult to get solo kills, so I recommend taking a more defensive summoner, either TP or one of the combat summoners instead. In the laning phase, you have a couple different ways to play depending on the matchup. If it's an easier sort of matchup, you can actually play reasonably aggressive. You can get a fair amount of push on the wave with your AoE Q. You can also look for a little bit of harassment with your E. People will be very surprised by the range, especially now that people aren't used to the rework. So sometimes against easier matchups, you can like get a kill, but ultimately in the laning phase, you are just looking to reach that level 9 and 1 item power spike. If you're against a difficult matchup, you're probably just looking to farm. You can maybe push in the wave a bit in the early game and have them kind of deal with all those stacked waves, but for the most part, I think you're just looking to kind of conserve your health. You have pretty cheap mana costs, and you can just look to farm from range and keep your CS high, make sure you don't die, and really aim to get to that like 1 item power spike and level 9. Teamfighting on Taliyah is very different from before. You used to kind of be looking for that big one shot onto 1 or more kind of targets, but now you play much more like a traditional mage, something more like Orianna, where you're looking to create as much kind of disruption and damage over a longer extended fight. So you've got very low cooldowns. You can cause a lot of like damage to the enemy team with your E and your W, and you want to make sure that you're kind of staying with your team, like not really looking for flanks, playing something more like a front and back, as I said, like a traditional control mage, and that's kind of the way that you can get the most use out of your cooldowns over a longer fight. It's quite important that you don't overextend yourself and die, because before, if you'd used all your cooldowns and died, it wouldn't be the end of the world. You've already kind of done your job, but now your kind of usefulness in the teamfight definitely scales with how long you stay alive and outputting damage. So make sure that you don't overcommit and you stay alive to keep outputting damage and CC. Mid game on Taliyah can be a little tough. You do have like decent push on the side wave, but you're not very good at 1v1ing. What you do have though is you kind of have a tempo cheat in your ultimate. So there's a couple ways you can use this. Either you can push the side wave out a little bit when it's safe, and then you can ult to your team to kind kind of create a fight with a numbers advantage while the enemy deals with that side wave. Alternatively, you can use your ult to actually back up someone else in the side wave. So one thing you can do as Taliyah is you can kind of shadow your top laner, for example, kind of be on that side of the map with them and then look to ult and help them get a kill in the side lane. Other ways you can play the mid game is you can just try like find farm ambiently, you know, like farm some camps, catch what waves you can, but then mainly play to like group it objectives and stuff like that. So there's a few things you can do. The main thing though is that you do have this Temper Chi ultimate, so you should try to use it, whether it's to create more pressure, you know, keep yourself farmed or force fights. There's a lot of ways to use it. But yeah, Taliyah can be quite powerful in the mid game if played well. Best thing you can do is just make sure that you keep up in gold and XP. So guys, that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully that's all you need to know about Taliyah. I think I've done a reasonable job of like kind of compressing all the information. If you have any more questions about her, please leave it below. And obviously this will kind of evolve over time as like her new rework gets a bit more figured out. Also, it's obviously a new kind of format of video. Let me know if you liked it and if it was helpful. I didn't want to make a full in-depth guide on her yet because I feel like there just isn't enough knowledge around her yet, and I wouldn't feel comfortable kind of going in depth as I would normally on the other champions and potentially giving you guys a lot of wrong information. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.